Hello, everyone, and welcome to this live interview. I'm Stan Bertolo, the host of Back in America, a podcast questioning America's culture, value, and identity. This interview is part of a series I'm conducting with the crew of the EPIX BBC docuseries Enslaved, the lost history of the Transatlantic Slave Trade, starring Samuel L. Jackson. If you've missed my previous interviews, the one with diver Kramer Kimberly and with the leading British marine archaeologist Sean Kingsley, a historical advisor to the film's diving crew, you will be able to find them on the podcast YouTube channel. Joining me today is Kinga Philipps, an award-winning journalist, explorer, writer, TV host, esteemed member of the Explorers Club, and the first member of the crew to be hired. Welcome to Back in America, Kinga.
Thank you so much for having me, Stan.
So before we dive into your experience with Enslaved, is there anything you want to add to my short introduction?
I think that is a beautiful introduction. I'm incredibly flattered. I should put that on a bumper sticker.
Thank you. So before we actually talk about this amazing experience you had with Enslaved, do you want to say a few words about your own origin, your Polish origin?
Yes, my last name is not, in fact, Philipps. That is a name taken for the benefit of Americans being able to pronounce it. My last name is, in fact, Szpakiewicz. And I was born in Warsaw, Poland, and then came to the United States when I was 5 years old because my father was part of the Solidarity movement in Poland. And we came to the US with our suitcases, basically pretending that we were coming on vacation, and we were offered political asylum here because of the relationship with Solidarity. And we actually turned the political asylum down because we were afraid at the time that the government in Poland would not be kind to our family there. So we became US citizens the natural way without accepting the political asylum.
Interesting. And I read that your parents have been quite a globetrotter themselves, right? How do you think that has influenced you and your love for travel?
Greatly. I think what your family exposes you to at such a young age becomes a part of who you are. And I am incredibly grateful that my parents were such activists and were so ingrained with culture and experience and travel and being world citizens that just became who I am.
And where is home to you now?
Home is where I'm sitting now or where my bags are packed. I actually am so comfortable living out of a suitcase. And for most of my life, that is the case. Last year, of course, this year in 2020, I have not traveled that much as most people have not. But last year, for instance, between Enslaved and the other show that I was working on, I was on the road for 7 months and incredibly happy. Really, I can fit everything that I need into a bag and be perfectly happy on the road.
Right. So I read that much of your journalism switches between contemporary and historical topics, right?
Yeah.
You worked on police corruption, on gang violence, human trafficking, but also on second Ethiopian churches. How do you think you're able to really switch between contemporary topics and historical subjects?
You know, I have been very fortunate in this business that the projects that have come my way and the people I've had the opportunity to work with are also consistent with my passion. And I made a commitment to myself and to the people I worked with a long time ago that I would only accept jobs that excite me and I'm passionate about, because only then can I be a good journalist and a good storyteller and do a good job for whatever project is at hand. And to me, whether it is something contemporary or whether it is something historical in the space of anthropology, in the space of mythology, legends, all of that stuff fascinates me incredibly. And I have a background in a lot of that I've touched on, an expert in nothing but a jack of all trades, if you will. And so to me, whether it is a modern story told through a modern lens or a historical story is less significant than the value and the importance of the story at hand.
Right. I introduced you as a traveler, as a journalist, as a TV host. What is it? And now we're going to switch into the story of today, right, which is Enslaved. What is it that you brought to the series?
Well, that's a very good question. And that's a question I ask myself every time I am brought onto a project, because I want to be someone who offers something. So, and something unique, because realistically for any one of these projects, they could hire anyone, right? So when someone comes to me, I always ask the question of what do I bring to the table? And you were correct that I was one of the first people to be hired in May of 2018. It was actually Kramer and myself. And we had not met because we were filming in two different locations. And we did not meet until 5 months later when we all worked together after the rest of the team was hired. And when I was first brought on to Enslaved, I was brought on because the production team wanted a female. They wanted a journalist, a storyteller, someone who was comfortable in the television space, who had done that before, and also someone who was a diver. And realistically, that's a pretty small pool of people to pull from for the TV scape. And when I came on board and I shot in May in the Isles of Scilly, and I remember having a discussion with Simca, our director, who's absolutely incredible. And I said, well, I realize I bring the female perspective to this, but I think that we would be good to have a well-rounded team. And he had already been thinking the same thing, was in agreement. And so he then tasked me with finding some of the other divers, which was an immense pleasure. And I was able, through some of my sources in the dive community, to locate Alana and Josh. And the moment I talked to both of them, I went, these are our people. They're incredible. They have wonderful perspectives. They bring the right energy. And then when I got to know Kramer, you talk to him. Kramer is one of the most profoundly feeling, just deep, eloquent, beautifully worded. I mean, it brings tears to my eyes to talk about him. I call him Papa Bear. So we all became a very tight-knit family, all bringing unique lenses to the project.
Right. Were you part of the Diving with a Purpose? I believe you were before this adventure.
No, I joined Diving with a Purpose during the course of the Enslaved documentary film. Yeah.
Okay. So you actually didn't know the team beside people that you've contacted, right?
No. We all came together on this.
Do you miss working with them now that the filming is over?
I do, but we all keep in touch. You know, I have been very fortunate doing this for 20 years and doing multiple TV shows. And each time you're put together in a unit, a family unit, and you travel the world. So you hope that you get along with these people. And I've been very fortunate that for all the shows that I've done, most of the teams, my co-hosts, the camera guys, the sound guys have all become dear friends. I have to say that with Enslaved, probably because of the nature of what we were doing and the profound emotional element there, and just the way we all got on, this is one of my favorite teams I've ever worked with. And we all keep in touch regularly and wish each other happy holidays and hope to see each other once this pandemic is over. Maybe I'll go for a dive together.
So obviously, I mean, this race was a major element of everything about this docuseries. How did it feel for you, being white and being European, to be diving with this Black American and Caribbean crew?
You know, that's a very interesting question. And the answer is that I never felt in any way like there was a difference in all of us. There was obviously a different perspective, and we all brought different backgrounds and experiences and lenses, both in our lifetimes and historical and different contexts. But because we were all such an incredible family unit, and we were all so profoundly supportive of each other and the lenses through which we experienced this, I never for a moment felt like there was a distinction between what I was allowed to feel and experience and anybody else. And that's a really beautiful thing to say, I think, especially in the modern world, which there is divisiveness. And it's actually interesting that this documentary came out during this time in history, because we were all so profoundly cohesive on a humanitarian level that the distinctions between our skin color and the historical context of our experiences melded together into something actually really beautiful. And, you know, we laughed along the way, like in some of the scenes even, we laugh that I'm the token white girl in the shots. And it's funny because you see that now when you see the documentary, but from an experience standpoint, there was never such a thing. I never felt that my perspective or my lens was any less part of the contribution to this than anybody else's. And yet I learned so much and such deep experiences from the lenses of the others. And they all brought something to the table that we all walked away with a completely fresh and different and unique perspective on every single one of these stories that we experienced. And these stories, most of them were not positive. There were a lot of tears shed. There was a lot of heartache and a lot of times that our stomach turned in these moments where we uncovered pieces of history that on a human level were just horrible and devastating and hard to witness and hard to talk about. And it was such a cathartic experience, I think, for all of us to be with such a team that was able to express themselves and really work through and talk through these experiences and then also share them with the audience.
Right. That's quite interesting what you're saying. How much did you know of the trade slave before you embarked in this project?
It's a good question too. So, most people are familiar with the transatlantic slave trade to a degree, which I was. And as a journalist and someone who devours books and history, I think I had done a good amount of research just on my own to that point. Then obviously when I came on board with the project, it becomes my job to research even more deeply. But every one of these stories we dug so deeply into on location. And the fact is that when you are boots on the ground, you can read all the books and you can watch all the documentaries and read articles and stories and historical pieces that have been, placed before you. But until you are boots on the ground and you are talking to these people, like in Suriname, for instance, one of the most profound moments of the entire journey for us was Suriname, which is a very difficult shoot. We were working 18-hour days. I actually remember being on a boat for 9 hours a day with no shade. We were so sunburned. I was. Kramer stood and blocked the sun with his body from me because my European skin and my light eyes was just roasting no matter how much sunblock I put on. That's if we talk about being white on this shoot, that was the perfect example. And that day at the end of that shoot, Kramer said, I have this strange tingling in my skin. I've never felt this before. And I said, Papa Bear, that's a sunburn. Even he was sunburned that day. And I walked away with my lips peeling off and was swollen and so sunburned. It was a difficult shoot. But what made it emotionally very difficult was the story of the slave ship Enslaved, where all those people were lost. And by lost, I mean murdered. But also because we had the ability to visit this village, a maroon village. And these were people who were enslaved, men and women, who fought against their captors and the slave owners and escaped into the jungle and created these communities. And we realized in that moment that had the people of the slave ship Enslaved been allowed to get off that ship instead of had the hatches nailed down and essentially murdered, they would have joined these communities. And when you are boots on the ground in that place and having that realization, it hits you so much harder than if you ever read that story in a book or a news article or even watched it in our documentary. It's extremely, extremely profound.
And I wonder if, you've dived with the crew on some of those, sunken ship. Did you recover any artifact, any object from the ground? And if you did, how did you feel when you were holding in your hand those pieces of artifact?
So we did. Most of the ships that we would investigate were of an era where we're talking about wooden ships. So mostly everything was gone as far as the structure of the actual ship. You would find some rigging. In some cases, we found cannons, cannonballs. We found bricks in Costa Rica. The Isles of Scilly, we actually did find a manila bracelet. And the manila bracelets were a form of currency for human beings. And that, I've talked about this a few times with the team because there was this duality of emotions, that when we were diving, we were having so much fun as a team and so excited to tell these stories because they need to be told. And also we're all divers, so we're very passionate about the underwater world and the experiences you have. So there's this element of, wow, this is super fun. And then you start to realize and remember what you're doing there in the story that you're telling. And when you get to the point where you're actually holding an artifact in your hand, and in the Isles of Scilly, which was the first dive that I ever did, we brought up a manila, and sitting there and holding that in my hand and realizing that the reason that was on that ship was because it was being used to trade human lives. The floor drops out from under you. You have this like heavy moment of realization that you're holding a really ugly piece of history. But it's also important to tell that story. It's also important to hold that, to show that, to tell what it means, because as you know, history tends to repeat itself, doesn't it? And history also, we all have the attention spans of fruit flies these days. So to remind people of what those pieces represent, I think is incredibly important.
Right. Did you ever feel guilty being a white person there?
No, because I was never meant to feel that way. And that was part of the beauty of being part of this team. I felt guilty being a human being and seeing what human beings do to each other, which I feel the same way in the modern world, seeing things that we do to each other now. So, I think that's what I was saying before, that I was never made to feel any different or like I should have felt guilty because of the color of my skin, when what we were telling were very human stories and very ugly human stories. And many times when we held the shackles, or we held the manillas, or we held the balls and chains that were attached to these people so that they couldn't run away, we felt such immense grief as human beings that this was ever done to anyone. One of the more profound moments for me personally was when we were in the Isles of Scilly and we did that dive and we brought up the manila. And then we were allowed to go to the museum and look at some of the other artifacts that were brought up from that slave wreck. And there was a beautiful rosary. My family is Roman Catholic. I came from Eastern Europe. And I pictured in my mind the captain of this slave ship, in his captain's quarters, probably beautiful and luxurious, praying this rosary while there were men and women chained in squalor below. And it was such a juxtaposition to me. And I thought, well, what are you praying for? Good weather? What are you praying for while you are enslaving human beings below deck? And it was this incredible realization of, at that time in history, that person felt that this was the way things are. That was status quo, and that's what you do. And this was business. And you think about that in light of the modern world and how we treat certain people now. And the question becomes, where in our lives now do we accept something as status quo, which should never be? And I think that, to me, that's the takeaway from a series like Enslaved. And I hope a lot of people walk away with that kind of an emotional recognition of how they might be applying that blasé attitude to something in their daily lives when they should really question it.
Yeah, and this is exactly what I wanted to ask you. What do you think this documentary is achieving that would not have been possible without diving on the wrecks?
Another very good question. I have gotten some really beautiful emails from people. And I think that what production did so well on this project is that, there have been a lot of documentaries done about the transatlantic slave trade. I don't know of any that have been done before that were from this perspective of looking at the ships that didn't make it and the stories of those people who were on board and digging so deeply into them, and then going and actually physically being in these locations. I think anytime that you take the audience to a location and share that experience with them, it's going to be a lot more profound than if we just had a historical talking head, spewing facts. again, we don't have very, very long attention spans these days. Everyone's on their phone and their iPad and this and that you almost have to bring in that adventure element to get people interested, and then layer in the story into that. And they did such a great job of bringing in a Hollywood celebrity like Sam, and bringing in Afua, who is so incredibly eloquent in the way she tells a story, and then Simca, who I think is so wonderful and compelling on camera, and then us, the team that actually goes diving. So you have all these revolving elements that keep the story interesting and exciting, and we're telling it from a different lens that people have not seen before.
Yeah, when I spoke with Kramer, I was interested to see how he doesn't want to talk about feelings. For him, it's fact and it's crime scenes. And he goes like, no, I don't want to get into the feeling thing. How did you feel? If we go on to the feeling department, did you experience it differently? And can you talk about the way people express themselves differently after each dive?
Well, first of all, I will say that Kramer is wonderful with expressing his feelings, and he has a lot of them. And we had incredible exchanges on and off camera, having conversations about the subject matter at hand. And it was such a safe space for all of us to share our feelings. We cried, we held hands, people would walk away and take a moment and really process what they were feeling, because it was very deep and very profound. And we had people who had such different lenses and backgrounds and upbringings and just life experiences, all bringing something to the table, that it helped to enlighten all of us and allowed us each to share our own feelings about this, whether it is from a human perspective or whether it's a Kramer feeling it from, Kramer's a former detective, which is why he looked at things as a crime scene. He also talked about his upbringing and told us a lot about that on a personal level over dinners. And so we came to understand very much his lens. When we went to the UK, Alana's father is white and he is from the UK. Her mother is from the Bahamas and she is Black. So she has a very, very mixed background, and she actually met her family for the first time, her extended family, on camera in the UK, which was an absolute fluke that we got there. And she went, Penzance, I know this area. And it turned out that is where her father was from, and she got to meet family members there. So we had all these different incredible lenses, and people got to process that. And the fact that it was such a safe space and no one ever said, you're not allowed to feel that. You're the white girl. You're not allowed to feel that. Or, you're not allowed to have this emotion, or you need to look at it from this lens. No one was ever put in a corner or said, this is what you can or can't feel. We shared so openly that it became a profound experience for all of us. It changed all of us.
Mm-hmm. Were there any interesting moment that you lived during the filming that didn't make it into the final cuts?
That is probably the heartache of every project I have been a part of. That yes, when you film a documentary like this and you have a 6-part series and you've got 6 hours to show the audience, we filmed this over 2 years. And there were so many profound moments and so many exchanges that just truly couldn't, you ultimately, when you're editing something like this together, you can't fit it in. But one that I loved, again, back in Suriname, is we went to meet this couple who had purchased this property in the jungle of Suriname. And this area, we saw historical photographs, was plantation after plantation after plantation after plantation. The jungle has taken it all back. But this family came and purchased this home. And I believe it was her ancestor who was a slave on this property, and he ended up taking the property over and living there. And so when she came back, she and her husband now live on this property, and they started dredging the channels there so they could get their boats in, because it's all in the Amazon jungle. We had a chainsaw our way in, the tides affect it, and they started bringing up artifacts, and they had shackles, and they just torture devices, essentially torture devices. And they've created this little museum. And so we got to go in there and have this woman who is connected to this history tell us the story of these artifacts that they found on their property, where her ancestors had been enslaved with these shackles that we were now holding. And that segment didn't make it in, but for all of us, I would say that was an unbelievably profound experience.
Wow. And it didn't make it to the final.
There was time. There wasn't time.
Yeah. And I'm sure, yeah. I mean, 2 years is a long time. I mean, you did only that for 2 years?
Yeah. No, I worked on other projects as well. We weren't consistently. We started in May of 2018, did Isles of Scilly, did the UK, went back to the UK that October. And then we spent, I think, 7 or 8 weeks on the road with Costa Rica, Jamaica, Florida, and then the Great Lakes, where we did the Underground Railroad, which was one of my favorite segments because that was the most positive. Like that was the happy story.
Yeah. Do you want to say a few words about that? The discovery of the Freedom ship, right?
Yeah, exactly.
On the Great Lake.
Yes, exactly. And that was such a beautiful story. And I got a wonderful email from a lady the other day who said that she actually hit the pause button when she started crying, and she sent me an email about how much she loved that episode. And I wrote her back and I said, that was one of my favorite episodes, because all along we had been going and telling these profound stories that are incredibly sad and incredibly heartbreaking and gut-wrenching even. When you start digging into the details of these and you are on location and below you is the grave of 600 plus people that were murdered, you feel that very deeply. And then we got to the Great Lakes, and it was one of our last shoots. And here we are telling the story of the people who made it and the people who helped them. And suddenly it was this, it brings tears to my eyes even now. Like it, just even the details of how these people were guided along with signals and certain flowers that were planted and lights, and the people who hid them, and the captains of these boats who ended up paying fines and put their careers at risk to help these people. We finally got to tell a story that redeemed humanity a little bit.
Yeah. I wonder, how did your initial goal, when you agreed, you've been contacted to join the team, you agreed to take part in this adventure, so you embarked on this project with personal goals. How did those goals shifted, if they shifted, as you went through the 2 years of filming?
Well, that's, I think, one of the best things about this line of work is that you always go in, especially as a journalist, with a commitment to telling a powerful story. And when they sent, I was actually on a boat reading the treatment for this when Simca and the team sent it to me. And I was really moved by the lens that they wanted to tell the story through. Because I've been doing this for 20 years. You see a lot of projects come your way, and I've gotten particular about the ones that I want to be a part of. And when something is very unique, I automatically think, well, this is something that I would like to invest my time in. And so I came on board as a journalist who wanted to tell a story and wanted to tell these stories. And then when I got to know the team, when I got to know Kramer and Alana and Josh and Afua and met Sam and Simca and our dive team from the UK, it changed into a much more personal story and a much more personal experience. And it became almost imperative to get that story across to the audience in a way that would move them as much as we were moved on the road having the experience. Just between people.
Right. Okay. Kinga, we are getting at the end of this interview. I've got 2 questions for you. One is there anything particular that I haven't asked you that you want to share?
Well, you asked some really good questions, some really excellent questions. I think I'm glad that I got to share the experience as being the token white girl on this team, and how I get to share that it was a collective human experience for all of us, and that we emotionally supported each other in such a beautiful way. And I could not be more grateful to the team for embracing me and allowing me to embrace them and their history and their culture, and them sharing that so freely with me.
Good. Finally, we are back in America. And I always ask the same question at the end of my interviews: what is America to you? And that's going to be very interesting because you were born in Poland?
That is a very good question. America is now as much home to me as my culture and my history. It is also a place that has given me immense opportunity and freedom to pursue exactly what I want to do. You know, if I today won the lottery and had $1 billion, I don't know if there's $1 billion lottery out there, I'd like to win it, but my life would not change that much because I have been given the opportunity to pursue exactly the kind of life that I would hope to make for myself. And that to me is a beautiful statement that I am very happy with my life, and it has only been allowed because of the opportunities that have been provided me by living in this country.
Okay. Well, Kinga Philipps, thank you so much for giving us the time to tell your story and for sharing your experience today.
Thank you, Stan. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you.